It was a quiet day at the remote research station. Ethan had been working for weeks without much excitement. His job was simple: gather data on asteroid activity and monitor the local environment. But things were about to change in a way he never expected. One morning, a strange sound filled the air, followed by a bright flash. Ethan rushed to the observation window. There, hovering just above the ground, was a ship unlike anything he had ever seen. Its surface shimmered like liquid silver, and its shape seemed to change as it moved. The ship landed softly, its engines making no sound as it settled into place. Ethan's heart raced. He had never seen an alien ship before, and this was no ordinary visit. He grabbed his communicator and tried to contact the station's command center, but there was no response. It seemed as though the station had been cut off from the outside world. Minutes later, the hatch of the ship opened. From the shadows emerged a tall, slender figure. Her skin was a pale blue, her eyes large and bright, reflecting the light in strange ways. She wore a sleek suit that hugged her form and seemed to change color. With her movements, the alien woman stepped forward, her movements graceful and confident. Ethan stared, unsure of what to do. He had been trained for many situations, but this was something new. The woman approached slowly, her gaze fixed on him. "I'm Trella," she said, her voice smooth and calm. "I come in peace." Ethan blinked. He had heard of peaceful alien visitors before, but this felt different. He cleared his throat and tried to sound confident. "I'm Ethan," he replied. "What brings you here?" Trella didn't answer right away. Instead, she studied him for a moment, as if trying to understand him. Finally, she spoke. "My people, we do not understand love," she said. "We are a highly advanced species, but we have no concept of emotions such as love. It is not part of our culture. I have come to study it, to understand it, to experience it." Ethan frowned, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "You want to study love?" he asked. Still processing her words, Trella nodded. "Yes, my race sees emotions as weaknesses. Love is a mystery to us. We believe that by studying humans, we can better understand what love is. It is an experiment." Ethan felt a strange mix of curiosity and unease. He had read about alien species that lacked emotions, but he had never imagined it could be true. But Trella's calm demeanor suggested she wasn't joking. She was serious. "And you want me to help?" Ethan asked, still unsure of what she was asking for. "Indeed," Trella said, her eyes locking onto his. "You will be my subject. I will study your emotional reactions, your feelings, in exchange. You will have the chance to observe our technology and learn from it." Ethan stood there for a moment, processing her request. This was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It felt strange, but at the same time, it was a chance to learn about an entirely new species, a species that had no concept of love. "Okay," Ethan said, his voice steady but his heart racing. "I'll help you, but I have to know more about what you plan to do. I need to understand the nature of this experiment." Trella smiled slightly, as though she had expected him to ask. "I will not harm you. The experiment will involve observing your emotional responses to various stimuli. I will record your reactions and learn from them. There will be no danger to you. I simply need your cooperation." Ethan hesitated. He didn't fully trust her, but the opportunity was too great to pass up. He had always wanted to know more about alien cultures, and this could be his chance to gain first-hand knowledge. After a moment, he nodded. "All right, I agree to help," he said, "but I have one condition. You have to explain everything you're doing and why. I won't just be your lab rat." Trella's eyes seemed to soften slightly, as if she appreciated his request. "Agreed," she said. "I will explain everything in detail." With that, the two of them walked toward the ship. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this would be the beginning of something strange and new. He wasn't sure what he had just agreed to, but he knew one thing for certain: his life was about to change forever. After agreeing to help Trella, Ethan followed her into the alien ship. The interior was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls seemed to shimmer, constantly changing colors, and there was an air of quiet controlled technology everywhere. It was as if the ship itself was alive, responding to their presence. Ethan's curiosity grew, but so did his unease. He still didn't fully understand why Trella had chosen him or what her experiment would involve. Trella led him into a small room filled with strange equipment. There were devices that looked like they could measure everything from his heartbeat to his thoughts. She gestured for him to sit on a chair that seemed to mold itself to his body as soon as he sat down. And Ethan hesitated but obeyed. He had agreed to this, after all. "Please, relax," Trella said, her voice calm and soothing. "This will not hurt." Ethan nodded, though he couldn't help but feel nervous. Trella began connecting several small sensors to the skin. They were cool against his body, but they didn't feel uncomfortable. As she worked, Ethan tried to relax, but his mind raced. What if this experiment was more than just a study of love? What if there was more going on here than he realized? When she finished, Trella stood back and observed him closely. "I will begin with a simple test," she said. "I want to see how you react to different situations. Your emotions will give me the data I need." Ethan tried to steady his breathing, knowing that he was about to be the subject of an experiment unlike anything he had ever experienced. He had no idea what she would ask him to do, but he was determined to remain calm. Trella's first test was easy enough. She showed him a series of images on a screen. Some were of beautiful landscapes, while others were pictures of loved ones, happy families, and moments of connection. Ethan felt a wave of warmth spread through him as he looked at the family photos. The images made him think of his own family, and he couldn't help but smile. But when he looked at the landscapes, he felt nothing. The beauty of the images didn't touch him the same way. Trella watched him closely. Her eyes filled with curiosity. She didn't say anything, but her expression told Ethan she was gathering data, studying every little shift in his emotions. She asked him to rate his feelings on a scale of 1 to 10. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but he followed her instructions. "This is normal," she said after a moment. "You feel more when you see images of human connection. You do not feel the same way about landscapes." "That is interesting." Ethan frowned. Was it really so unusual for a person to feel more connected to images of family and love than to random pictures of nature? But he didn't question her. Instead, he just nodded. Double quotes now. Trella continued, "I will show you something else." The screen changed, and this time it displayed a scene that shocked Ethan. It was a video of a human couple saying goodbye. The man looked sad, and the woman's eyes were filled with tears. As she held onto him tightly, Ethan felt his throat tighten. As he watched, the emotional weight of the moment was heavy, and he couldn't look away. Trella observed him, her expression still unreadable. "What do you feel?" she asked. Ethan swallowed hard. "Sadness," he said quietly. It's hard to watch. I can feel what they're going through." Trella nodded, making notes on her device. "You have a deep emotional response to this." Why? Ethan wasn't sure how to explain it. "It's just, I guess I can understand their pain. It reminds me of times I've said goodbye to people I care about." She studied him for a long moment. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Your response is not just a reaction to the images. It is tied to your own experiences, your own emotions. This is love, yes?" Ethan felt a wave of confusion. "I think so," he said slowly. "It's love, or at least part of it. Saying goodbye, it's something we all experience." Trella turned away from him and made more notes. It is what I am trying to understand. The connection between emotion and memory. The way love is tied to experience." She turned back to him, her face still calm. But there was something different in her eyes now. A glimmer of understanding, perhaps even curiosity. "I will continue with more tests," she said. "But for now, I need you to rest." Ethan sat back in the chair, trying to process everything that had just happened. He had agreed to help Trella, but now he wasn't so sure. Was he just a subject to her, or was there more to their connection than he realized as he sat there in the silence? Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this experiment was only the beginning. He had opened himself up to Trella, but he wasn't sure if he was ready for the journey ahead. One thing was certain, though this was no longer just about science. It was about something much deeper, something that neither he nor Trella fully understood yet. Days passed, and the experiments continued. Each one was more intense than the last. Ethan tried to remain calm, but it was becoming harder. He was starting to feel like an object, a subject to be studied, rather than a person. The more Trella studied his emotions, the more he began to wonder if she truly understood what she was doing. Trella seemed focused on the data. She never smiled, never laughed, and always looked at him as if he were just another puzzle to solve. There were moments when Ethan felt like he was sharing something meaningful with her, but every time he did, she would record his reactions without offering any comfort or empathy. One evening, after a particularly long day of experiments, Ethan couldn't hold back his frustration anymore. They had just finished a series of tests where Trella had asked him to recall memories of his past relationships. It was difficult, emotional work for him, but Trella remained calm, detached, and focused only on the data. As Ethan stood up to leave the lab, he turned to face her. "Trella," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "why are you doing this? Why do you care so much about my emotions? You don't understand them." Trella didn't answer right away. She looked at him for a moment. Her large eyes filled with curiosity, but there was no warmth in them. Finally, she spoke. "I'm doing this because I need to understand love," she said. Her voice soft but steady. "You are the key. Your reactions to love are the data I need to solve the puzzle. I am not studying you, Ethan. I am studying love." Ethan shook his head, feeling a sense of sadness wash over him. "But Trella," he said, "you can't just measure love. It's not a puzzle to be solved. It's something you feel, something you live. It's not something you can study like a science experiment." Trella remained silent for a moment. She looked at the devices around her, the instruments she had used to collect his emotional responses, and then back at Ethan. "You are wrong," she said finally, her voice almost distant. "Feelings are not something to live by. They are reactions. Reactions can be understood, measured, and controlled. My people have no need for them. I do not need to feel what you feel. I only need to know why you feel it." Her words struck Ethan like a slap. He felt something deep inside him twist with frustration and hurt. She didn't get it. She didn't understand. He had known from the start that Trella was different, but now he saw just how different. She was studying love, yes, but she wasn't experiencing it, and perhaps she never would. He turned away, his heart heavy. "I can't do this anymore," he said quietly. "I can't keep being your test subject, Trella. I thought I was helping you, but now I see that I'm just a way for you to collect data." Trella's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, she finally spoke, her voice softer than before. "You misunderstand, Ethan," she said. "This is not just about data. I need to understand why you feel the way you do. I need to understand what it means to love." Her words were almost a whisper, and Ethan couldn't tell if she was talking to him or to herself. But there was something in her voice, something vulnerable, that he hadn't heard before. It made him pause, just for a second. But his feelings of confusion and anger didn't fade. "You can't understand love just by studying it," Ethan replied, his voice quiet but firm. "You have to feel it. You have to live it. And until you do, you'll never understand." Trella stepped closer, her presence imposing yet strangely gentle. She placed a hand on his arm, and for the first time, Ethan felt a shift in her. It was subtle but real. "I don't know how to feel what you feel, Ethan," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I want to. I want to understand. You are different from everyone I have met. You make me want to learn, to know." Ethan looked at her, searching her eyes for any sign of true understanding. But he found only uncertainty. "Maybe that's the problem," he said softly. "You want to understand love, but you don't know how to feel it. I can't help you with that, Trella. You'll have to figure that out on your own." Trella stood there, silent for a long time, as though his words had struck her harder than anything she had expected. Finally, she pulled her hand back and stepped away. "Perhaps you are right," she said, her voice still soft, but I cannot stop. Now, I need to know what love is. As Ethan left the room, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of sadness. He knew Trella wasn't ready to understand love, not in the way he did, and that made him question whether their connection was even possible. He wasn't just helping her with her research anymore. He had become tangled up in her confusion. But how long could he stay in a situation where she could never truly understand what he was feeling? The days after their conversation were quiet. Ethan kept to himself, avoiding Trella as much as possible. He felt like he had opened up to her, sharing his thoughts and feelings, only to be met with confusion and cold curiosity. He didn't know what to expect from their next experiment, but he had a feeling it would be just as impersonal as the others. Trella seemed focused, as always. She didn't push him further, but she didn't stop her work either. Yet, there was something different in the way she watched him now. It wasn't just scientific curiosity. It felt almost like she was trying to understand him in a way that wasn't just about data. He wasn't sure if it was a shift in her perspective or just his imagination. One afternoon, as Ethan worked on his own projects, Trella approached him with a new request. She had spent days studying him, but this time, she wanted something more personal. She asked him to share the most significant experience of his life, the moment that had defined his understanding of love. Why is this important? Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. He hadn't expected her to ask him something so personal, especially after their last conversation. Because love, for you, is not just a feeling. It is shaped by your experiences, Trella explained, her voice calm but now tinged with a hint of curiosity. If I understand your most significant experience, I may be closer to understanding love itself. Ethan hesitated. He had never shared such personal stories before, not even with friends or family, but something in Trella's tone made him want to give her this piece of himself, despite his doubts. With a deep breath, he began. It was when I lost someone, my first love. He paused, his eyes distant as memories of the past flooded his mind. She was everything to me, and one day, she was just gone. She died in a car accident, and I never had the chance to say goodbye. That moment, when I realized I would never see her again, was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. Trella listened carefully, her gaze softening. She didn't interrupt, didn't ask for more data. She just watched him, sensing the rawness of his emotions. I didn't know how to live without her. Ethan continued, his voice shaking slightly. I had to learn how to keep going, even though a part of me felt like I had died too. That's the part of love I don't think anyone understands until they go through it. The emptiness, the longing, the feeling that something is missing, even when everything else seems fine. There was a long silence after he finished speaking. Trella stood still, processing his words. Ethan wasn't sure what to expect. Should he feel relieved? Was this experiment over? But when Trella spoke again, her voice was different. It was quieter, softer, and tinged with something he couldn't quite place. That is, a very painful memory, she said, almost to herself. I have seen the data on grief, but I have never understood it. I have never felt it. Ethan looked at her, searching her expression for some sign of understanding. But Trella remained unreadable, her face as neutral as ever. Still, there was something in her eyes that had shifted. He couldn't quite explain it, but he noticed it. You don't need to understand it, Trella, Ethan said, his voice growing softer. Some things are just meant to be felt, not understood. Grief, love, pain. They're all parts of being human. You can't measure them. You can't study them like a math problem. Trella was quiet for a long time. She seemed to be weighing his words carefully. Finally, she spoke, her tone different than before, almost gentle. I wish I could feel what you feel, she said. I want to understand this, but I don't know how. Ethan stared at her. It was the first time she had admitted to not knowing something, not just scientifically, but emotionally. And in that moment, he realized something important. Maybe Trella wasn't so different from him after all. Maybe she was just trying to make sense of something she didn't understand. Just like he had when he lost someone he loved. I can't teach you how to feel it, Trella, he said slowly, but maybe we can start by just sharing our experiences. You listen, and I'll talk. And maybe, over time, you'll learn that it's okay to not have all the answers. Trella nodded, her expression still serious, but there was a small shift in the way she looked at him. For the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of something deeper in her eyes. Maybe it was empathy. Maybe it was just curiosity, but it felt like the beginning of something new, something more human. The next few days were different. The experiments continued, but now they felt less like cold tests and more like conversations. Ethan shared more of his past, and Trella listened, her usual clinical detachment slowly fading away. She still didn't understand love, not in the way that he did, but she seemed to be learning more with each passing day. Ethan began to notice changes in himself as well. He had once seen Trella as nothing more than a scientist, someone who didn't care about the emotional toll her experiments were taking. But now, he saw her as someone who was trying to understand, trying to connect, and that connection, however small, began to mean more to him than he had expected. In some ways, Ethan still wasn't sure where this would go. He didn't know if Trella would ever truly understand what love was, or if their relationship would ever be more than just an experiment. But one thing was clear: something was changing between them, and that, in itself, was a start. The days that followed were filled with an air of quiet tension. Ethan wasn't sure what had changed, but something had. Their interactions were no longer just about data or emotionless experiments. There was a subtle shift, a growing connection between them that neither could ignore. Trella was no longer the detached scientist who only saw him as a subject. She had begun to ask him more personal questions, listen to his stories with more than just curiosity. In return, Ethan found himself wanting to share even more, not just because it was part of the experiment, but because it felt right. One evening, after a particularly long session of tests, Ethan and Trella found themselves sitting together in the quiet observation room of the alien ship. The lights were dim, and the stars outside twinkled in the distance. It was a peaceful moment, and Ethan realized how much he had come to appreciate these small moments of calm. Trella, he said, breaking the silence, I've been thinking about something. You said before that you wanted to understand love, but do you even know what it feels like yet? I mean, really feel it? Trella was quiet for a moment, her eyes focused on the view outside the window. She didn't answer right away, and Ethan could see her thinking carefully, as if she was choosing her words. Finally, she turned to him. I think I understand it more than I did before, she said slowly, her voice softer than usual. I have been studying your responses, but you were right. I don't know how it feels. I can't measure it, and that has been frustrating for me. Ethan looked at her, a feeling of understanding growing in his chest. It was strange, but he felt as though he was beginning to understand Trella better than before. Maybe she couldn't understand love the way he did, but she was trying, and for the first time, Ethan could see that she wasn't just gathering data. She was trying to connect, to feel something deeper. Maybe it's not about measuring or studying it, Ethan said softly. Maybe it's just about living it. Love isn't something you can understand from a book or an experiment. You have to experience it. You have to give it and receive it. Trella was silent for a long moment, her eyes not leaving his face. Finally, she spoke. I want to understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know how. I don't know if I can ever feel it the way you do. Ethan reached out, his hand resting gently on hers. It was an unexpected gesture, but one that felt natural. Trella didn't pull away. Instead, she looked at their hands, her eyes filled with something that Ethan couldn't quite place. Was it hope? Was it fear? He couldn't tell. You don't have to feel it exactly the same way I do, Ethan said, quietly, but maybe you can start by trusting me, by letting yourself feel something, even if it's just a little bit. Maybe that's where it begins. For the first time, Trella seemed uncertain. She looked at him, her gaze searching. Ethan could tell that she was torn, struggling with something deep inside her. She had been so focused on understanding, on measuring, that she had forgotten what it meant to just feel. "You're asking me to let go of everything I've been taught," she said softly. "Everything my people believe. It's not easy, I know," Ethan replied. "But maybe it's worth it to learn something new, to feel something different." There was a long pause before Trella finally spoke again. "I am willing to try," she said, her voice firm but uncertain. "I will trust you, Ethan. I will try to understand. Not just love, but what it means to feel." Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. For the first time, he felt like they were on the same path. It wasn't clear where that path would lead, but they were walking it together. And that was enough for now. As the evening went on, they sat together in silence, the stars outside, the window reflecting the quiet understanding between them. Ethan didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if Trella would ever fully understand love, or if their connection would deepen into something more. But he knew one thing for certain: this was a moment of change. They had crossed a line from being strangers in an experiment to being people willing to learn from each other. And that, Ethan thought, was the first step toward understanding love. Not through data, not through tests, but through trust, connection, and the willingness to feel. The days that followed their conversation were different. Ethan and Trella no longer spoke only about the experiments. Their discussions had grown deeper, more personal. Trella was still learning, still trying to understand the emotions that had always been foreign to her. But something in her had changed. She was no longer just a scientist studying data. Now, she was a woman exploring something new, a feeling she couldn't explain, but wanted to understand. Ethan noticed the small changes in her. She was more curious about his feelings, more willing to listen when he spoke of his past. She didn't just observe his emotional reactions anymore. She asked questions, real questions, like a person trying to understand another person, not just a subject. It was the first time Ethan felt like he wasn't just being measured, he was being seen. But there was still a barrier between them. It wasn't just about their differences in understanding love. It was something larger, something that Ethan didn't fully grasp but felt every time they were together. One evening, as Ethan was working in his small corner of the ship, Trella entered the room. She was quiet, almost hesitant, as if unsure whether she should say something or not. Ethan looked up from his work and smiled, but he could tell that something was weighing on her. "Trella," he said, setting down his tools. "Is everything okay?" She nodded, but her eyes were distant. "I have been thinking," she began, her voice soft, "about what we've been doing, about the experiments and what it means for both of us." Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. He didn't know where this conversation would go, but he felt that it was important. Trella had always been direct, but this time, there was a certain vulnerability in her voice that made him listen more closely. "You've made progress," Ethan said gently. "You've learned a lot, and I think you've started to feel things in a new way. But what's bothering you?" Trella sighed and stepped closer to him, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I don't know if I can continue with the experiments the way I have been. I don't want to be just an observer anymore. I want to understand love, not just study it, and that means I need to stop measuring you. I need to feel it too." Ethan's heart raced at her words. Was this what he had been waiting for? Was Trella finally admitting that she wasn't just trying to learn about love through science? She was starting to feel it. But as quickly as the thought crossed his mind, doubt followed. "Trella," he said carefully, "what do you mean by feel it? Do you mean you're ready to experience love with me, or are you still studying it like a test?" Trella's eyes met his, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of something real, something raw in her expression. She hesitated for a moment, as if the words she wanted to say were too difficult to speak. "I don't know if I can truly love you the way you do," Trella admitted softly. "I don't know if I can ever feel the same, but I want to try. I want to learn what it means to share that with someone, and I want to share it with you." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. He had spent so much time trying to help Trella understand love, trying to explain something that felt so natural to him but was so foreign to her. But now, He realized that their connection had deepened. And it wasn't just about understanding, it was about trust. He took a step closer to her, his heart pounding in his chest. "Trella," he said softly, "I don't know if you'll ever love me the way I love you, but that's okay. We don't need to measure it or define it. We just need to feel it, together." Trella reached out, her hand trembling slightly. As she touched his arm, for the first time, she looked at him with something other than curiosity. She looked at him with a sense of wonder, as though she had just discovered something she never thought possible. But before Ethan could say anything else, the communication system on the ship buzzed, interrupting their moment. Ethan reluctantly pulled away, looking toward the screen. A message flashed on the screen, and the words that appeared made his heart sink. It was from the Alien Council, Trella's people. "Trella," Ethan said, his voice tense. "It's from your people, Trella's." Face paled as she read the message. She turned back to Ethan, her expression grim. "They know," she said quietly. "They know what I've been doing, and they are not happy about it." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean? What will they do?" Trella hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. "They will punish me for failing to complete my mission as they instructed. They don't understand why I've changed the way I think. They see me as a failure now." Ethan's heart ached for her. He knew Trella's people didn't understand love, but he hadn't realized how much pressure they had put on her. She was caught between two worlds, one where she had to obey her people, and another where she was learning to trust her own emotions. "You don't have to go back to them," Ethan said firmly. "You don't have to follow their rules if they're wrong. You've changed. You've learned." Trella looked at him, her face full of fear and confusion. "I don't know what to do, Ethan," she whispered. "If I disobey them, I'll lose everything. But if I stay, I'll lose you." The tension between Ethan and Trella grew as they stood in the small room, staring at the screen displaying the message from her people. Trella looked pale, her eyes filled with fear. She had been caught between the life she had known and the one she was starting to build with. "Ethan," the message was clear. Trella's people were displeased with her actions. They had expected results, not feelings, and now they were ready to punish her for her choices. Ethan felt a deep sense of protectiveness rise within him. He couldn't stand seeing Trella in pain, and he knew that she had already sacrificed so much for her mission. She had come to learn about love, and now it felt like she was being torn away from it. "I won't let them take you from me," Ethan said firmly, stepping closer to Trella. His voice was filled with determination. Trella looked up at him, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What can we do? They are too powerful. I can't go against them. If I refuse, I will lose everything." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. "Maybe we can find a way to escape," he said. "We don't have to follow the rules. We've already made our choice." Ethan's words hung in the air between them. He had no plan, no clear idea of how to escape, but he was certain that they could not let Trella return to her people. The bond between them had grown stronger than either of them had expected, and Ethan couldn't let go of the connection they had built. Trella looked at him, her expression torn. "I don't know if I can do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've always been loyal to my people, but I don't want to lose you, Ethan. I don't want to go back to a life without love. Without you." Ethan reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "You don't have to lose me," he said softly. "We'll find a way to be together. We'll make a new life, one that's ours, not theirs." The words were simple, but they carried a weight of hope that made Trella's heart swell. For the first time, she felt as though there was a way forward. She didn't have to choose between her people and Ethan. She could choose herself, choose the love that was slowly growing inside her, even if she didn't fully understand it yet. "I'm scared," Trella admitted, her voice trembling. "I've never known anything like this, but I want to try. I want to be with you." Ethan smiled at her, a gentle warmth spreading through him. "Then we'll figure it out together. We don't need their approval, Trella. We have each other." The next few days were filled with quiet planning. Ethan and Trella spent their time in the ship, working together to find a way to escape. They knew the risks, Trella's people were powerful, and if they came after them, there would be little they could do to stop them. But Ethan was determined to protect her, and he knew that if they stayed, they would both lose what they had worked so hard to build. On the morning they decided to leave, Trella took one last look at the ship's control room. It had been her home for so long, the place where she had studied, worked, and learned. But now, it felt empty. The thought of returning to her people was no longer an option. She had chosen a new path, one that led away from the cold calculations of her race and towards something more real, more human. "We're ready," Ethan said, standing beside her, his voice filled with confidence. Ethan had already disabled the communication system so they wouldn't be tracked, and they had set the course for a distant planet where they could hide and build a life together. It was a risk, but it was their only chance. Trella nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She still wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew that with Ethan by her side, she could face whatever came next. Together, they made their way to the ship's control room. Ethan took the pilot's seat, and Trella stood beside him, her hands trembling as she watched the stars ahead. For the first time, she felt a sense of freedom, not just from her people, but from everything that had held her back. As the ship lifted off, Ethan glanced over at her, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "We're free," he said softly. Ethan's words were simple, but they carried a weight of truth. They had made their choice, and now they would live by it. Together, they would find their own way, create their own future. They didn't need the approval of her people. They had each other, and that was enough. As the ship soared through the stars, leaving behind the familiar world of Trella's people, she couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for sure. She had found something worth fighting for, and for the first time, she understood that love wasn't something that could be measured or studied. It was something that had to be felt, something that had to be lived, and with Ethan by her side, she was ready to live it.